All right, guys, on today's episode, we're going to be cleaning Maggie. This is Derek's dad's car. He doesn't know we're doing it, so it should be a good surprise. That and a whole lot more on this episode. Drive and protect.
Good to be met.
Surprise.
Wow.
This is a 1950 MGTD chassis number 3631, affectionately named Maggie, and has been sitting in Derek's barn since 1988.
This is a 1950 MGTD my dad picked up 1970 when he graduated high school.
This was Derek's father's car that he purchased in July of 1970, and he named her Maggie after the Rod Stewart song Maggie May, debuted in 1971. He drove it until 1988, until, like many other things, life just got in the way and it sat in the barn for 34 years. A few weeks ago, I visited Derek and found the Triumph, the Datsun 510, and a bunch of other projects in various states of repair, and then I saw Maggie tucked away in the corner, and you could really see she needed some love. The new 1950s version of the MG, called the MG-TD, was announced in January of 1950 for roughly $1,855 or $22,000 in today's value. It had a 4-speed manual, rack and pinion steering, standard equipment bumpers and overriders, and was 5 inches wider than its predecessor. Nearly 30,000 TDs were produced, with over 23,000 of them alone going to the United States. Now, the major complaint from the US buyers was that the electrical system was the British 12-volt instead of the US 6-volt, making them a challenge to work on. Just as a point of reference, in 1952, Motor Trend reported the top speed of the MG as 77 miles an hour with a 0 to 60 in a whopping 23.5 seconds. Now, fast forward to 2022, the Toyota Corolla Cross, which is considered one of the slowest cars of the year by Car and Driver, its 0 to 60 is 10.5 seconds, nearly 13 seconds faster, but still not nearly as fun. Anyhow, when Derek brought the 510 to the ammo studio for me to clean, he also threw this one on the trailer as well. But at first glance, in daylight, this thing is really bad. But in my mind, the worse it is, the more I'm convinced I can actually learn something new. Plus, I had Kevin and Jason here. I could put my formulas to the test in the worst case scenario and evaluate what could be done better or worse or whatever. So I'm all in. Plus, more importantly, Derek's dad doesn't know that we have it. So watch until the end when we reveal it to him. It's pretty cool. As you can see, the paint is covered in dust, spider webs, and rust in certain areas, but it looks like there might be life underneath all that dirt. The interior, same exact thing, but the dashboard is amazing. Look at all those gauges. I can't wait to clean that. Anyhow, step one is to rinse the paint. Now, for this particular car, Jason used the ammo power washer, but he turned down the pressure at first just to sort of get a feel of how sensitive the paint was for very obvious reasons. You can see some of it's flaking off, etc., so keep that in mind. As we became more comfortable with the integrity of the paint, we raised the pressure, especially for the wheel cleaning. Next, Kevin hopped in and foamed the paint with Ammo Foam and Boost Anti-Salt, which has a lower pH, perfect for this type of condition, and the idea is just to let it soak for a bit to allow the formula to do its work. Much like we did on the Datsun 510 wash, we started the MG with dual density brushes first. Obviously, scratching the paint is not really an immediate concern at this particular time. We have far larger issues to address first, specifically removing all the dirt and the grime from the trim and the tight spots. Check this out. With all the soap and the suds on the wheel, you can see which of the tires was leaking by the bubbles it created, which is kind of funny. Next, I rinsed the paint, and Maggie took on a new life and lost about 5 pounds in 30 minutes. Now, this is always my favorite part of resurrecting and preserving forgotten cars. At this stage, you can start to get a glimpse of what it could be. After the rinse, we opened up the hood to see if anything could be done, and much like most of our barn finds or lost cars or first washes, etc., the engine is a haven for rodents. In this case, the battery box looks like a nice plot of real estate to build a home, so we decided to remove the engine cover completely to see what we could clean up. Under the hood is an inline 4-cylinder 1.3 liter with dual SU carbs. Now, SU carbs are super simple, but they're really amazing. They were invented by Herbert Skinner, thus the name Skinner Union, or SU. These work with the use of a variable venturi that's controlled by a piston and constant depression through static pressure. Now, this sounds really complicated, but it's actually not. Check out the video link above if you really want to nerd out, but let's just say to see one in person is really cool. They were used on MGs, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Austin, Jaguar, Triumphs, and Volvos, to name a few. While we were snooping around the engine and checking out the carbs, I found a built-in box between the firewall and the engine that had an old toolkit, a Band-Aid box full of some random things, and a jack inside. For step one in the engine was just to vacuum up all the seeds and the mouse droppings. When Jason opened the door of the box, we could actually see the last time the oil was changed, and it was about 1984, so I think it's time to do an oil change. Afterwards, Jason was covering up the carbs and other sensitive areas with tin foil while Kevin was drying the paint and blowing out all the tight spots. Next, I pumped up the Pro Foamer and soaked the engine in frothy anti-salt. Then we agitated with dual density brushes, and the years of grime just oozed off the engine. Look at the valve cover with just a few swipes. The difference is huge after just a few minutes, so we were all excited to give this thing a new life. As it turns out, the engine block is actually reddish orange underneath all that black oily grime, so this was becoming really fun, and it just all slid off the cast iron block. Then Kevin power washed, and the transformation was amazing. Now keep in mind that we jacked up the heat on the power washer as well. This is really helpful in oily, grimy situations like this one, and the before and after on the engine was huge for just about 45 minutes or so of work.
The brightwork, we've got potentially stainless steel, chrome, aluminum, and since we don't have a lot of time to determine what each material is, we can use a very safe brightwork polish, and we're using a fine paint polish. It's got advanced abrasives. It won't scour or cut into sensitive materials, and I'm just going to briskly rub it with a microfiber towel, do a quick wipe, and we've already got improved sheen. Now obviously on this one it's not perfect. Looks like this had some breakthrough of the chroming, and so you can ramp up the shine by using a superfine steel wool with the same polish, and as long as you don't push too hard, it's going to slide across the surface and cut away that stuck on oxidation and debris. So same spot, same polish, wipe away, and much, much better.
All right, so obviously old vintage car, lots of old paint, but if I can bring you back here, I'm going to point out why we're going to hand rub this car instead of machine polishing, because the hand rubbing will give us precision. So if we're polishing in this area, we can do that very precisely by hand. But as you can see, we can rub out this area and not interrupt the surrounding paint.
So with that, I started to hand polish with the 3-inch Rupes yellow pad and yellow polish. After a few passes, you can see the single stage paint starting to come back to life slowly, but the integrity of the paint while I was doing that was pretty good. So then I decided to use the same exact pad, but this time on an LHR 75, which is a pneumatic polisher for faster work. The 50/50 was huge on the fender that I just did with the machine, so then we both decided to use the machine when possible and hand when it wasn't. Now take a closer look here. The gloss was increased, but that cracking that you're seeing is starting from underneath, and it's not going to be repaired by detailing. Again, as those imperfections are actually starting from the bottom going up through the paint, where on the flip side, polishing the paint starts from the top and works its way down. So in other words, it's a catch-22. For me to remove those cracks or crow's feet, we call them, you'd have to go all the way through the paint, all the way down, thus rendering it useless because you'd have no paint left. While Jason and I were playing with that, Kevin was working on the headlights, and look at the before and after. Absolutely amazing. Now in this case, don't be afraid to use 4/0 steel wool to remove light oxidation as well. Bright and early the next day, Kevin and Jason unfortunately were back on a plane to the West Coast, and I had to finish up the remaining bright work on the grill and the wheels. To brighten up the hubcaps, I squeezed a little bit of polish onto the steel wool itself and then rubbed with medium pressure on the pitted out surface, and you can see they start to come back really, really well. Now, if you look really close, they're not perfect, but they're significantly better from the before and after. Up next was the inside of the MG. Now this thing was a total mess. Spider webs everywhere, dust, dirt. The doors and the seats were absolutely disgusting. The front area was covered in this weird oily black substance, but check out the gauge cluster. So freaking cool. My favorite part of the car by far. Step one was easy, just a quick vacuum. But as I was doing that, I realized how small the door was as I tried to fit inside. So I gently put the top down to gain a bit more access and to have more light. Next, I sprayed lather and scrubbed with a dual density brush and the scrubber, and the dash came right back to life. In the tight spots, I used the steamer with a sniper tip to flush out the seams and creases. I repeated the same steps on the rest of the dashboard and even used tiny pieces of steel wool with polish on them on the rims of the gauges just to brighten them up a little bit. For the seats and the doors, I scrubbed with a brush and a scrub pad, then steamed, and the difference was night and day. Hey guys, real quick, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and checking out my website, ammonyc.com, for all the tools and products used. Also, be sure to download my detailing simulator video game to power wash, detail, and then sell the cars online. You can even upgrade your detail shop to look exactly like the ammo studio within the game and find new lost cars in the barn, clean them up, and sell them online for a profit to continue upgrading your tools and equipment in your own shop. It's super fun. Click the link in the description below. Okay, next I put the top back up, steamed the windows and the roof before hand polishing the plastic to clean up the years of fading. Once the top was clean, I massaged ammo mousse into the material and let it soak into the dry surface for a few minutes before wiping to a matte finish. This will bring back some of the suppleness to the material and add UV protection to the roof. As a final step, I used Reflex Pro Finishing Wax, aka Blush, which is Reflex Pro coating mixed with Carnauba wax. It's unbelievable. I'll never give up wax in my car. It's just way too much fun and wildly therapeutic. When I was all done, I mean, come on, even this radio paint looked really good for what it was. It's hard to argue with the wet look of wax. It's still my favorite thing to do on paint. Lastly, I added mud to the leaky, dry rotting rubber before the big reveal. Hey!
Yo!
What's going on, man?
Good to see you.
Come on in. There she is.
Hey.
Nice to meet
Hi.
you.
Good to be met.
Surprise.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
Wow.
It's there. It's green. Underneath the rust, it's green.
Oh, she looks great.
This actually works too. We took this off, peeled it back, took this thing off, and we polished
Sweet.
it on a little rack. These lights came back like crazy. This side is the best side right here. This angle here.
Yeah, that's the door that got smashed.
Yes, that's still in the back. But it's green and she looks good.
Yeah.
She's shiny. And this right here was probably the biggest before and after. This was totally brown, like, and when we were cleaning it, this gunk was like coming off and falling over. It was quite entertaining to say the very least. And all these little areas here, I polished these up. All this we polished up. All this we polished up. Looks pretty good to
Yeah,
me.
this is what I was looking for.
It was good.
No, seriously, because I parked it in '88 with the intention of doing a ground-up restoration, and over the years, never got around to it.
Right.
And this, I think, is the incentive. I'd like to take the body off, do the entire chassis, and then plunk this back on it just the way it is.
That's awesome. Well, that was the goal.
Character, patina, this is the Maggie that I know and love.
As always, guys, thanks for watching. And if you know of a car, boat, motorcycle, or plane that you want me to bring back to life, email me at larry@ammonyc.com or visit my website, ammonyc.com, for more info. As always, thanks again, and we'll see you next week.